everyone, I'm Chloe, and welcome to the Cool Down Room. Today, we will be doing another episode of my segment of the podcast called Chlo with the Flow. If you've been here long enough, you will remember that I did an entire series last summer about F1 The Academy on Netflix. Before I get into what I'm actually talking about today, I feel the need to talk about F1 The Academy. For some reason, I could not find anything on the internet that says that there will be a new season of the show coming out covering the 2025 F1 Academy season. I think this is stupid because the first season of it was so good I binge watched it in 2 days. Elise and I had the privilege of watching both F1 Academy races in Vegas last year. It was so cool. There was a lot of drama last year. A lot happened. It was similar to the F1 season. It was a very close, in terms of points for the championship. I think there deserves to be another season. Reese Witherspoon, Susie Wolf. Can we make that happen? I'm sure they did film it. I just don't know if it's coming out because it said it would come out in May, and it's almost May, and I haven't heard anything. Before we get started, I want to mention that Dorian Pon, the 2025 F1 Academy champion, spoiler alert, for Mercedes, has been set as a development driver for Mercedes, which is huge. She actually got to drive an F1 car last weekend at Silverstone with George and Kimmy and Toto and Susie in attendance. This is a monumental move for women finally getting back on the F1 circuit. F1 Academy cars are drastically different than F1 cars, so the fact that she was allowed to drive an F1 car, I think it was George's F1 car, is absolutely massive steps towards getting women more involved in F1, just aside from being engineers and technicians and mechanics and things like that. So that was a huge thing. Elise wanted me to mention that there was unfortunately a driver who passed away at Nuremberg last weekend. Max was competing in this race in Nuremberg, and unfortunately a driver did pass away in a huge crash that I think was like a 6-car pileup. I don't know anything about the type of racing that happens at Nuremberg because it is very different than F1. I think it's endurance racing. The driver herself was 66 years old. So, although having a death in motorsport is very unfortunate, it does kind of, the risk does come with the job. I have no idea who the driver was. I think I read somewhere that she was Finnish. But, having a 66-year-old driver, Fernando is the oldest driver on the F1 circuit, and he's only in his 40s. So to have a 66-year-old endurance driver at Nuremberg is actually insane. But I don't know who she is, but it's very unfortunate that happened. And Max was competing in the same race that she passed away during, so he did post about it on his social media, but Max, of course, did very well. Anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about the F1... I'm going to restart that. Henry, cut that out. I will be talking today about F1 Academy, and not just in the sense of recapping last season. If there's a new season out on Netflix, I will be talking about it, of F1 The Academy, but as far as I'm concerned, there's not, which is pretty disappointing in my opinion. Today, I will actually be giving a rundown of the season so far, the 2026 season, because there has been a few changes made, and we have a lot of new drivers to introduce. Like I mentioned above, Dorian Pon won the 2025 F1 Academy Championship during her second year, and Maya Woog was runner-up. It was also her second year of F1 Academy, which means that neither of them are driving in F1 Academy this year. Some of the drivers that we lost purely because they had hit their 2-year mark in F1 Academy are Chloe Chambers for Haas, our girl Leah Block for Williams, Tina Hausman for Aston Martin, and Nareya Marti for Tommy Hilfiger. Nareya hadn't hit her 2-year mark yet. She just switched to endurance racing for BMW España. So there are a few drivers that were on the circuit last year that are still in F1 Academy, and it's their second year. So if you hear me mention Alba Larsen later, she is the driver for Ferrari right now, and it is her second year in F1 Academy. The new drivers for this year, I'm just going to say some of them. Most of the grid is entirely new, but I'm just going to read some of them that are going to come up later in what I'm talking about. So Mathilda Patz is new. She's for Aston Martin. She's German. Peyton Westcott is the driver for Mercedes. She's American. I think it's insane that Mercedes has an American driver. Kaylee Countryman for Haas, who's also American. Ava Dobson for American Express, another American. Hello? 3 American drivers in F1 Academy. This is insane. And Lisa Billiard for Gatorade/Art, who is French. That's not all of the new drivers. It's just some I felt like mentioning because they will be coming up later. As a reminder, the F1 Academy season works very differently than F1. If you want to learn more, go listen to my F1 Academy series from last summer because I basically just like explained how the sport works in the first episode. I was listening to it the other day. I hope I did a good job, but I was recording it from my parents' closet during the summer. And if I sound out of breath in those episodes, it's because the longer I spent in my parents' closet, the warmer it got. And that was like my third take doing the podcast. So I was pretty sweaty. Anyway, there are 17 drivers on the grid for this F1 Academy season with 14 races this season. There are usually 16 races. However, with the war in Iran, they did have to scratch 2 of the races. It's the same 2 F1 races that got canceled this month, meaning the month of April. The teams also are working a little bit differently than last year. This year, there are 6 F1 Academy teams with 3 drivers each. Each of the drivers may represent a different sponsor, but they're essentially on the same team. So I'll break it down. The teams for this year are Prema, Campos, MP Motorsport, Rodin, Art, and High Tech. So if you listened to my F1 Academy series from last summer or followed F1 Academy last year, you might remember that Tommy Hilfiger and Charlotte Tilbury were both sponsoring teams. They both still are, just less directly. For Tommy Hilfiger, this is because they are one of the principal sponsors for the Cadillac F1 team. So most of their money and attention has gone to building that new F1 team for the season. And for Charlotte Tilbury, they are not sponsoring an F1 Academy driver this year. And this is because their driver from last year, she hit her 2-year mark. But also because if a driver for F1 Academy is to be sponsored by Charlotte Tilbury, this must come as a direct result of them being the winner of the Charlotte Tilbury Scholarship, which helps support young girls in the British Indoor Karting Championship. So as long as somebody wins that championship, they're going to get sponsored in F1 Academy. But I don't think a woman won the British Indoor Karting Championship this year, which means that there isn't a driver to sponsor. So even though I said there are 17 drivers, there are 6 teams of 3, which means 18. And this is referring to everyone but the wildcard driver this year, a Chinese driver named Wei Shi, who is racing for Just Sports. It's either Just or Yus, I don't know, but it's spelled Juss. Wildcard driver basically just means that she's been doing really well on her own circuit, and so they decided to include her in, but there's nobody else being sponsored for, I'm just going to say Yus Sports because it's European. So, yeah. Anyway, let's get into business. Like I said, because of the war in Iran, there's been a few switch-ups with the racetracks. There have been 3 additional races added for F1 Academy in North America, in Austin and Montreal. So they will coincide with the F1 races in Austin and Montreal. There will be 3 races on those weekends instead of just 2, because if you remember correctly, there are 2 races on F1 Academy weekends instead of just 1 like F1. So on F1, there's 1 race per weekend, and it's on Sunday. F1 Academy has 2 races, 1 on Saturday and 1 on Sunday. So instead of having 2 races per weekend in Austin and Montreal, they're going to have 3 races. I'm not exactly sure how that's going to work, but that was the decision they came to because they had to cancel the 2 races in the Middle East. And some exciting news for F1 Academy is that we've added a new team, or a few new teams, actually. One of them is Sephora, which is kind of huge. The driver for the Sephora team, her name is Natalia Granada. She's from Spain. Remember that name. She's very good. Obviously, since Sauber switched to Audi, so did their F1 Academy team. The driver for Audi is Emma Feckelbermeyer? I don't know how to say that. We're going to say Felkbermeyer. Remember that name. She's also leading the charts currently. Other new teams, including Tiger, Yes Sports, Lego, American Express, and Gatorade. So Lego is like a completely new sponsor. I can't remember off the top of my head who they're sponsoring, but F1 Academy did do a collaboration with Lego earlier this year, and so the driver's helmet is very Lego inspired. And yeah, American Express falls underneath like V-Carb, like Visa Cash App, which is like, you know, an F1 team with Liam and, oh my God, I just forgot, Liam and Arvid currently. So she kind of falls under the same branch as them. So the F1 Academy season started this year in Shanghai, and that has been the only race since the season started. As there were supposed to be races scheduled in both places, they have F1 races in the month of April, but they were both canceled. So technically they were supposed to have like Shanghai and then 2 other races later this month. Now they've only had Shanghai, which means F1 Academy drivers have had a really long break from driving, so they're all very anxious to get back. The Shanghai weekend went a little differently than usual. There was a feature race in addition to the reverse grid race. So reverse grid races are very common in F1 Academy, but it's never something you're going to see in F1. It basically means that the grid is reversed from the start, which I will go over in a minute. But the way Shanghai weekend was structured went a free practice on Friday, as well as a qualifying on Friday. The reverse grid race was on Saturday, and the feature race was on Sunday. F1 Academy races usually take place before F1 races, so that's why the Chinese Grand Prix was in the afternoon. It's because the F1 Academy race was in the morning before that. So still a 2-race weekend, just one of them was in reverse, and this is where I explain what a reverse grid means. This means that from the top 8 qualifiers, the person who finished 8th starts in the front. The person who finished 1st starts from the back. So, yeah, because there's only 19 drivers instead of 22, like there are in F1 this year, the drivers, basically like the top 8 drivers get points, not top 10, because there's less drivers, if that makes sense. So, yeah. Because there's only basically been one race, I'm going to structure the rest of this episode like I would a race week episode with Elise, and just kind of go through like what happened and just like break it down so that when we pick up the F1 Academy season in Austin, it'll be like you guys will be caught up. Anyway, we're starting on Friday, March 13th, so like over a month ago, with free practice, of which F1 Academy only gets 1 free practice. So unlike F1 where there are 3, they only get 1. There isn't a YouTube video for free practice like there is in F1. I don't know why. I do have the results. But I instead decided for most of this to copy and paste from the official F1 Academy website so I didn't mess anything up. Also because it's like, this isn't plagiarism. I did paraphrase some of it because some of the details were just like very nitty gritty and you guys didn't need to know that. But most of this is the direct transcript from the F1 Academy website. So it's like basically what you would be hearing the commentators say. Instead, it's just typed out instead of like said. Anyway, Alicia Polmowski started the 2026 F1 Academy season in style as she confidently set the pace in the sole free practice session around the Shanghai International Circuit. I feel like I should be British when I'm reading this because all of the commentators are. Despite having the lowest lap count on the board, the Red Bull Racing driver sealed the top seat to eke out an advantage of .467 over Alba Larsen for Ferrari. Rookie Peyton Westcott completed the top 3 for Mercedes, only .024 seconds off of the Ferrari Junior. And when they say junior, they mean that this is her second year in F1 Academy. Amid a gradual start to the 40-minute session, it came down to Ferrari's Larsen to kick off the action as she set one of the first flying laps. The Danish driver quickly bettered her own effort, becoming one of the few to brave the dusty conditions, while Puma driver Rachel Robertson, who isn't new, she was on the grid last year. Actually, scratch that. Rachel Robertson is new. She's driving for Puma. Found herself just 0.2 adrift of the lead. Larsen's hold on P1 did not last for long, as Robertson then went half a second faster to break into the 2.05, with Nina Gademan sat in 3rd place at the halfway point. Nina Gademan is not new. This is her second year in F1 Academy. I talked about her a lot last year when I was doing the F1 Academy series because she was very prevalent last year. As the traffic increased, the gaps began to narrow, with Emma Felbermeyer, that's I think what it is, the next to set the fastest lap of the session before Mercedes Westcott immediately shot into 1st place. The lead continued to exchange hands as Larsen came back with another flying lap, edging out the American by less than a 10th. McLaren driver Ella Lloyd, second year in F1 Academy, entered the contest taking P2 before she was demoted by fellow second-year racer Polmowski, with the top 4 covered by just .071 seconds. Elsewhere, the drivers continued to explore the limits, with Shi Wei triggering a brief yellow flag appearance after spinning at turn 1 before being able to rejoin. Polmowski's Campos Racing teammate Rafaela Ferreira was 4th behind Larsen and Westcott, with Lisa Billiard setting at the second quickest rookie in P5. Mathilda Patz was next for Aston Martin ahead of Lloyd, Febelmeyer, and Tag Er's Megan Bruce, who's new, who saved a late lockup while Gademan rounded up the top 10. So that was a lot because it's worded very technically. If you didn't get that, Alicia Polmowski for Red Bull Racing got P1 in free practice, Alba Larsen for Ferrari got P2, and P3 was Peyton Westcott for Mercedes, but that was just a free practice, so none of it actually really matters, if we're being honest. Let's get into qualifying, which actually does have a YouTube video if you're interested in watching it. However, I found the write-up to be more helpful again. So, again, I'm paraphrasing from the official F1 Academy website, so it's going to sound very technical, but I am going to summarize it at the bottom. And I'm going to continue doing this format for the rest of the weekend. Okay. Hold on, I lost my place. Sorry, Henry. Cut this out. Okay. Alicia Polmowski conquered qualifying in Shanghai to claim her long-awaited maiden pole position, starting her second year in the series on a high. After coming close to pole on numerous occasions last season, the Red Bull Racing driver was untouchable as she continued to better her own efforts, finishing with a rapid time of 2:04.182. Ferrari's Elba Larsen settled for second place, making her first front-row start in F1 Academy, with fellow sophomore driver Emma Felbermeyer? This is going to be a constant battle the whole episode because she is very prevalent, lining up in P3. Following a short delay to the start, the drivers were keen to hit the track and build temperature in their tires as they adapted to the changed grip levels. With F1 free practice taking place before qualifying, the surface was significantly different compared to the F1 Academy session earlier that day. This is because they had F1 qualifying. I think it went F1 Academy free practice, F1 free practice. Then the next day it was like F1 Academy qualifying, F1 qualifying. So like it's very different. The reason they're saying it's very different is because they've had 22 F1 cars rip it around the Shanghai International Circuit for like an hour. And so that changes the track like a lot because there's tire marks and gravel and whatever. Anyway, Aston Martin's Mathilda Patch jumped to the top of the timings early on with her teammate Peyton Westcott. However, the rookies' times were quickly eclipsed by Polmowski and Felbermeyer as the Audi driver set the pace with a time of 2:05.362. Polmowski's next effort showed that there were plenty of improvements still to come as she took P1 before Larsen leapt from 5th to 1st, building a buffer of over 2. At the halfway mark, the Ferrari driver was firmly on provisional pole while all of the drivers returned to the pits to bolt on a set of fresh tires, preparing for more runs. But before anyone could find a major improvement, the red flags were waved as Haas's Kaylee Countryman slowed to a halt on track. She soon got going again and joined her competitors in the pit lane, but the temporary disruption meant that everyone had to complete another outlap with less than 10 minutes to go, adding another element of pressure to the proceedings. Polmowski was the first to set her eyes on pole position, and despite a small mistake, she drove the fastest lap of the session so far, albeit by less than a tenth to Larsen. Westcott, meanwhile, demonstrated that her pace in practice wasn't a fluke as she began to challenge for the top spot. The Mercedes driver couldn't improve in sectors 2 and 3 and remained in third place, but it was a different story for Polmowski as she extended her advantage to 0.4 over Larsen. Her lap proved to be impossible to beat in the final seconds, and she held on to pole ahead of Larsen and Felbermeyer, who improved late on to demote Rafaela Ferreira to 4th. Gatorade rookie Lisa Billiard was next on the timing sheets, taking 5th place. A lap time deletion saw Westcott demoted from P4 to P6 ahead of Natalia Granada, while Alpine's Nada Gademan secured P8, earning her 4th reverse pole position for race 1. Rounding out the top 10 were Ava Dobson and McLaren's Ella Lloyd. So again, that was a lot. It's probably because most of the writers and announcers for F1 Academy are British. It's worded exactly like they would be commentating it. I'm sure it doesn't sound like that when I'm saying it, but if you think about how they commentate F1 races, it sounds pretty similar. Alicia Polmowski was in P1 for pole position, Alba Larsen for P2, and Elena Felbermeyer for P3. Kaylee Countryman, who's for Haas, she's American, stopped on the track for a minute and still managed to finish qualifying. Okay, so if you remember my episodes about F1 Academy last summer, or you've watched the show, you should remember that there are 2 races in F1 Academy weekend, like I've mentioned before. So that was qualifying. The first race of the weekend was the reverse grid. So this means that Nina Gademan started in P1, even though she got P8 in quali. And this is because in F1 Academy, the top 8 drivers get points, not top 10 like F1. Top 8 drivers swap places with each other, which meant Elisa Polmowski started in P8 because she got pole in quali. Okay. Again, we're going to read directly from the race report on the F1 Academy website just because it's easier for me to digest personally. I tried watching the videos and it was very chaotic. I couldn't really get into a groove of it just because qualifying isn't broken up into Q1, Q2, Q3 because it's shorter. It's only 40 minutes instead of an hour. Okay, so now we're going to get into the reverse grid race, which was on Saturday, I think, before the F1 Academy qualifying, or F1 qualifying, sorry. It was a solid start for the front row, with reverse grid pole sitter Gademan holding firm off the line with Granada going with her. Lisa Billiard was bogged down off the line, tumbling down from 3rd to 8th. At the tail end of the order, contact between Mathilda Patz and Shi Wei forced the Aston Martin driver to box for a new front wing. Out front, Gademan slowly began to eke out a 1.2-second gap over Granada, who in turn put 6/10 between her and 3rd place Ferreira. After starting in P8, Alicia Palmowski tried to find her way past Alba Larson for P6, but couldn't find the room through turns 14 and 15. 1 lap later, Peyton Westcott looked to have pulled off and overtaken Ferreira at the hairpin, but ran wide along the Racing Bulls driver to get back through. On lap 7, Larson's late dive up the inside of Emma Fibelmeyer at turn 3 backfired. Clipping the Audi driver's rear, Larson damaged her front wing, which broke off a few corners later. Losing downforce and grip, she was quickly overtaken by Billiard and Ella Lloyd. The safety car was deployed whilst the marshal retrieved the stricken front wing, eliminating Gademan's 1.5-second advantage over Granada. Returning to race conditions on lap 9, Gademan pulled off a textbook start to help the Spanish rookie at bay, and tried to break the toe down the straight. Meanwhile, Larson started to continue to struggle, going wide into the gravel at the final corner and dropping into P14. 1 lap later, Fibelmeyer was on the attack, diving up the inside of Westcott at turn 2. Although the Mercedes driver had the inside line to the next corner, the Austrian driver firmly shut the door. Westcott ran wide into her attempt to fight back, dropping into P6 behind Palmowski. In the battle for the final points, Lloyd dispatched Billiard for 7th. Their battle gave Ava Dobson and Rachel Robertson a chance, with the trio going 3 wide into turn 1. Dobson attempted to go around the outside of the Gatorade driver, but ran wide, allowing Billiard to regain the spot. While the pack battle behind, Gademan cruised to her second F1 Academy victory, 6/10 ahead of Granada. Fibelmeyer lifted herself onto the podium on the final lap, getting the switchback down on Ferreira to take 3rd. The Racing Bulls driver scored her career best result in 4th ahead of Palmowski and Westcott. Lloyd moved up from P10 to 7th alongside scoring the fastest lap point, and Billiard rounded out the points scored in 8th. So the results went Nina Gademan for Alpine in P1, Nina Granada in P2, and Fibelmeyer in P3. Unfortunately, Alba Larson suffered damage, so she finished second to last. Okay, that was the results from the reverse grid. If you remember from my F1 Academy session last summer, basically the results of race 1 determine how the grid for race 2 starts. So because Nina Gademan got P1, she's going to start at the front of the pack. It basically works like qualifying would work in F1. Okay, so for the feature race, at first I couldn't find a race report, and I was really confused because I was like, hello, and it was just showing me the one from last year. I eventually found it. I tried to watch the video again. The report was easier. I'm so sorry if this is really confusing because there's a lot for the feature race, but it was just easier for me if I could just read this to you guys instead of trying to write my own, because I don't know the world of F1 Academy as I know the world of F1. It works very differently, as we know. Okay, so now we're getting into the feature race, which was the second and final race of the weekend, which was on Sunday before the F1 race in Shanghai, a few hours before. Fibelmeyer beat Alicia Palmowski by just 2/10 over the line, with the Briton losing the lead from pole position at the race start. Close behind was Mercedes' Peyton Westcott, who stayed out of trouble to take the final spot on the podium in an eventful race. Amid cooler track conditions, Alba Larson executed a superb launch at lights out immediately to demote pole sitter Palmowski to P2, and the Briton subsequently lost out to Fibelmeyer before Westcott got stuck in the fight for the top 3. While the Red Bull Racing driver managed to hold on to P3 in the opening section of the circuit, Larson had already built a significant advantage over Fibelmeyer, with the Audi representative setting her sights on her second podium finish of the weekend. Elsewhere, there was heartbreak for rookie Natalia Granada, who previously shone as she crossed the line in P2 in her debut race. She inadvertently made contact with Racing Bull's Rafaela Ferreira on the opening lap, forcing her to head to the pits for a new front wing as she plummeted down the order. Wow, that's really dramatic. She plummeted down the order. That's very British. Battles continued to unfold through the fields as McLaren's Ella Lloyd came out on top in a 3-way contest for 6th place, edging out Ferreira, not Ferrari, and Lisa Billiard, and setting the fastest lap so far in the process. Although Larson had extended her lead around 2 seconds, a tense fight was developing just behind her. Pomowski, eager to reclaim a position, put pressure on Fabelmeyer, who mastered the late braking method needed to defend P2. Mercedes driver Peyton Westcott wasn't too far behind either and remained firmly in contention for a maiden podium. Larson's advantage was neutralized on lap 6 as the safety car was deployed following an incident between Esme Kosterman and Jade Jacquet that threw the Williams driver, Jade Jacquet, heading into the corner before driving into the rear of Kosterman's car, ruling them both out of race 2. With overtaking forbidden behind the safety car, the stranded cars were recovered, the pack was brought closer together, leaving the burden of perfecting the restart on the Ferrari leader's shoulders. So for reference, when Elise and I saw the first F1 Academy race in Vegas, there was a huge collision. I think it was Maya Woog. I think she went into the barriers or she hit Tina Hausman for Aston Martin. Maya Woog was the runner-up last year. She was so close. If she had won Vegas, I think she would have just eked out Dorian Pon for the championship. It was really dramatic. Nobody was really paying attention to the race on the rooftop we were on, and then she hit the barrier and Tina Hausman, and everybody was just like, like there was just like a collective gasp because the commentators were like, oh no, and Maya Woog is into the wall. And then there's just like really dramatic shot of her sitting on top of the wall, like shaking her head with her helmet. It was really sad. Anyway, so for reference, like when there's a safety car deployed in F1, the gap between some of the cars is so like large that even with the safety car, you can tell that some of the F1 cars are like way better than the others. But because F1 Academy cars are very different, when the safety car is deployed, they actually all get really close together in like a single file line, because under safety car, you're not allowed to pass people, if you didn't know. And it's really interesting to see because when they deployed the safety car after Maya Wood crashed in Vegas, all of them get really close together and they form a single file line. And Elise and I both have a video of all of the cars in like a single file line going really, really slowly around the track. So when they say that the pack was brought closer together, they literally mean it. There's not that big of a time gap between F1 Academy cars because they are pretty similar, meaning like McLaren. The difference between the F1 McLaren car and the F1 like Racing Bulls car is huge. The difference between the McLaren and like Ferrari F1 Academy car might be a lot closer together than an F1. Anyway, so a devastating to go back, Esme Kosterman and Jade Jacquet like collided. Jade Jacquet and Esme are both out of the race. Okay, so now Alba Larson is in the lead, but a devastating error saw her lose the lead at the final corner of the circuit when racing got underway once again. With a snap of oversteer sending her rattling over the gravel, she dropped to the tail end of the 10, allowing Fabelmeyer to inherit first place, albeit with Pomowski making her presence known in the Audi's mirrors. That's funny, making her presence known. The action wasn't quite over yet as wildcard driver Shi Wei and Puma-backed Rachel Robertson tangled on lap 10 as the latter locked up while taking the inside line, hitting her high-tech teammate's car. So Shi Wei and Rachel Robertson collided. Back at the front, Fabelmeyer clung onto the lead to take the checkered flag ahead of Pomowski, rounding out a strong weekend for Audi in the series. Despite a late challenge on the final lap, the Red Bull Racing driver settled for second place ahead of Westcott. Nina Gaidman was fourth for Alpine ahead of Lloyd and Ferreira, with rookie driver Billiard taking P7. Larson recovered to secure some valuable points in P8, while Megan Bruce and Ava Dobson were the last of the points finishers. Okay, that was a lot. Final result was Elena Fabelmeyer for Audi in P1, which is like absolutely stunning for an F1 team that just like completely rebranded themselves and have like a new engine and everything because it's Audi instead of Kick Sauber. Alicia Pomowski in P2, and Peyton Westcott for Mercedes. Hello, America on the podium in P3. Okay. 4 drivers DNF'd, being Rachel Robertson for Puma, Wei Shi, who collided with Rachel Robertson, Esme Kosterman for MP Motorsport, and Jade Jacquet for Williams. Jacquet lost control, spun into the barricades, and then into Kosterman. So it was very dramatic. And that's out of 19 drivers, 4 of them DNFing is a lot. But also like 6 drivers DNF'd in Australia for F1. So it's not saying much. Anyway, this was a bit of a shorter episode today. We're going to hit like barely 30 minutes. Kind of knew that was going to happen. That was the entire race weekend for the opening F1 Academy race for the season in Shanghai, China. The next F1 Academy race will be at the end of May in Montreal and will coincide with the F1 calendar. So make sure to tune in. Elise and I will maybe be doing a race week next week. I don't know what we're doing next week because there's no race, but the next time we will be together, it will be to cover Miami, which is one of our favorite race weekends, not only because the race is at a very reasonable time because it's in the U.S. for both of us, but also because it will be the first race week back from this dreadful break. And that will be the first weekend in May, which is right before both of us leave for summer vacation. So the races came back just in time for us to leave school for the summer. Until Miami and until the next episode, make sure to follow us on your YouTube and Spotify channels, like this video, and follow us on Instagram at Ithaca Cooldown Room. Until then, I hope you have a great week. Mwah!